This is a story about my macrobiotic family and its relationship to health and medicine, which had a lot to do with food. And I'm going to begin with my mom, who we called Dorothy. Dorothy grew up in an Irish Catholic family, the oldest of 10 children, and from a young age, she became very sensitive to the impact humans have on their world and the world's impact on us. She begins here by telling us about reading the famous book Silent Spring by Rachel Carson.
I think I read Silent Spring when I was a freshman in high school, so that would be grade 9, and it made a profound impact on me. Like, I was aghast. I had no idea that DDT was ruining birds' eggshells so they couldn't reproduce. And that's what stood out for me. If there was any other messaging in the book, I don't remember a lot of it. That was the focus. And also, I don't remember if it's in the book or if I learned it shortly afterwards, but the fact that DDT was being outlawed in the States, but it was still being exported to other countries, made me furious and deeply concerned. And that was kind of like the beginning of my understanding of American imperialism, economic imperialism. And by the time I was, like, say, 20, I'd done a tiny little bit of traveling, enough to have seen, like, the huge clouds of smog over New York City. I'd been through there a couple times. I grew up in New England, and it was common to see rivers that were really weird colors from industrial chemicals and stinky. And I told you the river that went through my city that I'd have to cross every time I went to the library had human shit in it. And we would, as kids, we would point it out if we could see it. I mean, it was kind of gross but entertaining to us because we were so little. But, I was appalled by all the pollution that I was growing up with. It was in the air, from some of the chemical pulp mills and things that were happening, and also a lot in the rivers, and dead fish were common sights. And, so there was a whole context there that I think people growing up today might not have, as children, depending on where they live, because there certainly is still enough of that going on. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the places where I lived have been cleaned up a lot. Mm-hmm. So it's it was a big effort, mainly in the beginning in the 60s and the 70s and early 80s to clean the environment up, and now it's getting all undone again. Just, crazy. I was thinking of myself as a spiritual seeker, I think, by the time when I was in my teens. I wanted to learn to meditate. I was still in high school. Couldn't find anybody to teach me. My mother told me there was a more of an esoteric branch of Christianity, of Catholicism, but she didn't really know much about it or how to connect with it. And by the time I was in the first year university, I wasn't considering myself a Catholic anymore. And I still wanted to meditate and maybe even live in a cave and meditate, and I was looking into Eastern religions, particularly those involved in meditation, but also the Sufis, and the devotional dance, yoga. I was kind of looking at them all.
A few years into her undergrad, students were shutting down campuses in protest of the Vietnam War and waking up to social injustices. My mom dropped out with the intention of living a life more in balance with the natural world around her.
The disruption and violence that have struck many of the nation's campuses this year finally engulfed Harvard, America's oldest university.
Many young people feel that our society has been serving false gods, if you will, kind of getting and gaining and working all your life or saving up things, and has not paid enough attention to a broader range of humane values in existence.
The summer after dropping out, my mom went to Woodstock. In many ways, she was a poster child of the counterculture at the time. One day, while smoking dope and making a chicken salad for friends, she decided to become a vegetarian, and that led her to discover macrobiotics, which became a fundamental influence in how we were raised.
I thought it might be a good idea to go to a health food store, like a natural food store, and find a vegetarian cookbook. Because most of the things I had learned to cook at home involved meat, and they weren't very fancy or anything. The only book I could find that was really on vegetarian cooking was Michio Kushi cookbook, or maybe it was Aveline Kushi's wife. So it was just a little book, and I bought that. And I remember the first things I tried to make were brown rice and soybeans. The soybeans were not very good. I thought soybeans should be a really central part of the diet because they're so full of protein, but I could not learn how to cook them well. I didn't like them. But thus began my journey. And then after that summer, I started working in the halfway house for ex-mental patients, and I was a cook there. And I had met Carl, and was kind of, exploring Boston and Cambridge on a different level than I had before when I was a student, and found out a lot more about macrobiotics, just kind of word of mouth and underground newspapers and that sort of thing. And so I got more into it, got my miso, got my tamari. One of the psychologists who was like a consultant who was connected with the halfway house but didn't live with us, he was a macrobiotic too. I remember he taught me the standard cold and flu remedy that people made with umeboshi plums and grated ginger and kudzu and what else? Something else, lemon. Most of my health interests, were centered on food. When I was in the mountains for a while, I even ground my own flour, to make bread, and I, for health reasons, because it was better, fresher, more vitamin E in it. And I even, because I was still very macrobiotic in those early days, I even made my own barley malt.
Wow.
So I wouldn't have to use sugar or honey. That didn't last terribly long, but when I did it in my baking, it was delicious.
My sisters have their own memories of being macrobiotic.
I remember from a kid's point of view, we didn't have any kind of sweetener other than barley malt. So even honey wasn't okay. And so Dorothy would sometimes make cookies, but they were like hockey pucks. They were like really, really hard, and they weren't very tasty. And I remember we ate a lot of seaweed and brown rice, and I remember carrots and fish. And I remember it being kind of weird. And I remember anytime I got any money, I would run to the store and buy chocolate bars. But I also remember she made tofu cheesecake, which was delicious. And there were some desserts that were really good. There was like some other thing that she made that was really good. So it wasn't all bad.
I remember that we ate a lot of seafood and brown rice and things like, Jell-O made with seaweed. And it was all local in-season food, and I remember it being super healthy. Not really what I think I wanted at the time. And I remember having chocolate cake at a friend's birthday party and promptly throwing it up because I was so healthy from all the macrobiotic food that my body reacted violently to chocolate cake.
I often wonder if the relative purity of our diet growing up made us less resilient to processed foods. Am I now struggling with prediabetes in part because my body didn't learn how to digest refined carbohydrates? Or on the other hand, would I be a full-blown diabetic already if I ate like my peers growing up?
You know that the placenta was in the freezer, right? Your placenta.
She didn't tell me that, no.
Yeah. And we would like open up the freezer and look at it and be like, And she said, oh yeah, I'm supposed to eat it. We were like,
Do you think she ever did?
no, she absolutely did not. As far as, I don't know what she did with it though when we moved. Should I ask her? When I was like, I don't know, early teenager in Dartmouth, I started smoking. And like I didn't smoke that much because it turns out I was allergic to it. But I would like smoke outside my bedroom window and think I was being so sneaky, and then I would throw the butts out. And so there was like a little collection of butts in the backyard. So I remember Dorothy sitting me down, and she was like, "You shouldn't be smoking. I know you're smoking because of the pile of butts." And then she was like, "The air is so polluted already." Like that was her logic for telling me I shouldn't smoke. That it was bad for me, and I was already getting bad air from the air, which is a funny way of putting it, right?
Although I was born with a midwife and a hippie doctor who lived next door attending my home birth, we did end up with a family doctor when we moved to Nova Scotia, and I asked my mom what she thought of him.
He was very mainstream, but that's what you could get in Nova Scotia in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you needed a mainstream doctor, especially if you're raising kids and things happen.
I don't remember you ever going or us ever being taken to anybody kind of alternative.
Well, we didn't have money for that.
Yeah.
The macrobiotic diet and lifestyle influenced our childhood in a lot of ways, despite not following the philosophy strictly. For us, eating lots of veggies and whole foods was medicine. Getting fresh air and exercise was medicine. Working with our minds through meditation, having self-confidence, and being kind to others was medicine. We were taught to be part of the natural world, grow vegetables, and take an interest in the seasons. These things influenced all of us in different ways. And as adults, I think we all appreciate our mother's dedication to raising us this way.
I mean, I'm sure it was good for us.